present. There we go. Okay. Cadbury Murray. There's two in there. Okay, there we go. So.
Yeah.
I can't get in there, so we're just gonna do this a little bit different. Can everyone hear me okay? Everyone ready? Give me like 2 minutes. We've been fighting with the laptop and the thing for almost an hour, and I'm not sure what is going on. I need to recover one more PowerPoint slide before we can get started. So I'm really sorry. The technology people have been in here trying to get this fixed, and it is being one of these days for sure. Yeah, they're early. All right, let's see. Oh boy. All right, so let's see. Let me grab my pen. All right, I see Rebecca is here. Delaney's here. Let me change the way this layout looks. Yeah, Delaney's here. Rebecca's here. Murray's here. 1, 2. And Nashville, we're missing Rebecca and.
Rebecca's
Rebecca's in there. She's remote. So Rebecca.
Kellen has a meeting today and can't come.
Okay, Kellen's out today.
Yes.
All right, and we're missing both people from Winter Park. So, and Winter Park is out. All right. Well, let's before we get going on all this, and I apologize for the problems with the computer and everything this morning, but sometimes it is what it is, and you roll with the punches and you do the best you can. But I think we're going to be okay today. There's only one thing that's kind of gotten altered, but we'll figure out a way around it. Hey, I'm liking the projects. These things are turning out really cool. I've got one. I think it might have been Casey. I've got to email you. I couldn't open your .wlxr. Like the extension is really weird and it won't open on my thing. So I think I've opened most of everyone else's things to make sure they are at least opening for the video things. And I've watched maybe 15 or 30 seconds, just kind of scrub through to see what's going on. These are really good. These are really good. Mr. Ure was in the office yesterday, and we were kind of looking at some of these things. And it was interesting. His comment was, this was really hard, the assignment. I said, yeah, let me get a little bit tighter on here. I said, yeah, the assignment itself was, let's take away the technology aspect of it, of coming up with enough information and content to fill 6 to 7 minutes of an informational documentary type thing. Just that in and of itself it's a substantial assignment. Then when you layer in the technology piece of making this into a production thing, this was tough. This was tough, and for some of you, this may have been much more easily accessible because you're used to doing things like this. And then other people, as I see, and these aren't bad things, but there's just a difference I can tell that some folks, this may be the first time you've ever tried to do something like this, and it's tricky. Here's the good news. You've all done this now one time. And when you go to the college or university in the next year or 2 years, these types of assignments are things that we do a lot of in the university. It's becoming less academic form of writing, of just writing papers. It's going in this direction of putting together multimedia presentations. So hopefully you'll have some long-term takeaway and some experience from this that will have some long-standing results for your effort for this. Possibly even next year, if you're juniors, you're going to be a senior next year in high school. Maybe this is a way you can, start to submit some other assignments. But it's really good. I haven't looked at any of the writings yet. The PowerPoint stuff looked pretty good. I think I had a couple people send me their PowerPoints for the second part of the assignment. Those look pretty good. I'm reconciling all those things today. I think Allison said her computer had a problem. JR's had a problem. So as long as you're just in touch with me, hey, I'm trying to send you this stuff. My computer, for whatever reason, ate my homework. I think Allison's completely crashed and John's completely crashed. And it didn't lose everything, but there's just the problem of getting things submitted, and I've certainly had my share of computer problems today. But I think everything I've gotten to this point has been okay. And whoever, I think that was Casey, I'll double check and I'll email you back about the link.
I used Windows Movie Maker.
Okay.
Can you download the DVD?
We'll figure something out. I'll get with you offline. We can figure this out. Let me get your thoughts and reaction and feedback as a class, and kind of not maybe collectively or individually, but your thoughts on this let's look at this as two pieces. I want to know about what you thought about the assignment and I really want to talk more about the rockumentary let's talk about the content of what was to be included in it, and then let's talk about the delivery of having to make that, because I want to adjust and get your feedback and maybe keep the assignment, adjust the assignment, change the assignment. Let me start up with Murray in the top left here. Do y'all have any thoughts or feedback? I mean, it can be comments, criticisms, or other.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of used to making videos for other classes, so like having that advantage, but I think if I didn't have that, it would have been a really hard assignment, but...
Okay, that's a very fair thing, and I'm not trying to drag people into the 21st century, but at some point I'm kind of dragging you into these assignments. What about the content of what was supposed to be covered? Do you feel like we've covered enough, and that you have enough knowledge to go find the missing pieces to make all this work? 'Cause there's still a pretty significant research component to that. Is that doable? Not so doable?
Yeah, that's doable.
Yeah. Rebecca, let me get some kind of feedback from you real quick on this.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Well, for me, I'd say parts of this project were really hard that I wouldn't think would be, because I guess I realized I have a really hard time working with no structure, I guess. Like there wasn't which is good. Like you had like such a wide range of possibilities to go from, and you could kind of just pick out things that interested you and you felt that were important for the viewer to see. But that was very hard for me, because I found myself wanting to be like, oh, like, do I need this small detail? Like, is this important? Like, should I put this in here, when it wasn't always necessary, and you kind of had to go with like somewhat bigger and like more substantial pieces of information. I'd also say that for like the video part of it, I had someone help me a lot with the editing, which I was like lucky for them to like show me how to do that. But I would not have known what I was doing without that.
Okay, that's a very fair and real thing. Let's talk about the parameters of the assignment, because you touched on it feels like, I mean, there's a lot of space to work within and not a lot of boundaries that have been established. And that's by design on my part. Of hopefully you had enough information of here's what I want to see at the end. The so what. It needs to be something you pick and discuss in depth, and you've got some key points to hit. And there's the rubric that explains how I'll grade it. But within the context of the rest of the assignment, no, there aren't a lot of. I'll call it like a recipe. Like probably, I mean, for some other assignments, your teachers say, include this, include this, include this, and you've got a kind of a checklist to make sure you're hitting all these things. And that by design, I didn't want to do that because I wanted to allow you the flexibility to wander within whatever you pick. But it's an unfamiliar feeling, I think, for high school kids and even for college students, that this being a college design class, I would say, I don't want to say get used to this, but kind of get used to this. That when you get assignments in the future, they're going to be a lot less prescriptive and much more open to your interpretation. Again, I said that for all 3 assignments, for the ones that you choose in there, the only incorrect answer is to not do it. That's the only way to really get it wrong. But if you have a position and defend your position, that's really the idea that I'm trying to get out, is that you pick up on something and you explore it and defend or refute that thing. So that's interesting that you pick up on that. But yeah, I would agree by that. Hopefully it wasn't so loose and not understandable that no one felt like they couldn't do it. And I don't think I didn't get any really feedback like that. So that's good. Delaney, what about you? Any thoughts or feedback for this?
Yeah, I've never really made a video ever. So that was kind of a challenge to figure out. But I know it's something that's gonna help because we're now have to create a video in one of our English classes in the next month as a group project. So at least I'll know how to do that, which will be nice. So it was a struggle, but I think it I understand it now, I guess. So it was kind of nice to figure it out now, I guess.
Well, that's good. Maybe this is more of a low stakes kind of thing than your immediate home classes that at your parents' schools. That's good. What about Nashville and the class down there? Any thoughts or criticisms or comments? And I'm open to criticism too. I got thick skin.
So I've made music videos before for French class, but this was a lot different. But it was nice. It was just kind of hard to get around the editing and stuff. But I thought that it was nice because you could kind of go your own way with what you wanted to do for the project. I thought it was pretty nice.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I thought that researching, we've been doing that in school for years, and that wasn't. We were used to that, but the actual process of making the video was definitely the most challenging part.
And this is for anyone to pick up on, and I'll wrap up this portion. Let's talk about just the technical time of building the video. What I don't want to happen is that you spend 40% of the time preparing the material and then 60% of the time trying to get it into the workable format that I've asked for. Do you feel like it was a pretty equitable distribution of research time versus then getting it packaged correctly, or did the packaging take a lot longer than you thought? And I'll come up to Lane in a second. Casey.
For me, a lot of the problem was I found my research, but finding videos that were applicable to my video that I wanted to use, because I embedded YouTube videos in my video. And it was really hard to find footage of the civil rights movement or freedom songs that weren't already embedded in a documentary, or it was just really hard to find video on YouTube, and I ended up using more modern day video because there was no original video of a lot of the songs I was looking for. Like This Little Light of Mine, there was.
Okay, that works. I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I hadn't really thought about that. It seems like the YouTube is a repository of endless information, and there are other video sites now that have so many things. I didn't think about there being maybe earlier from the 50s and 60s a more limited library of what's available. That's an interesting thought. I'm glad you said something. Delaney.
I actually had like the opposite problem. Like there was just so much information. Because I did the Beach Boys, and so like trying to figure out like, because you're used to like what you need to put in a paper, but trying to figure out what information is most important and how to like present it in a video, I think was a lot more challenging.
Okay, that's fair. Here's what I'm going to do as the follow-up from this assignment. I'll post up today, if I can get back into my class page. I'm having all kinds of problems getting into it this morning. I'm going to post up a thing, and it's going to be, I'm not sure what I'll call it yet. I'll have some kind of catchy title. But what I would like for each of you to do is maybe include 2 sentences for the next class of things that I don't anticipate, but things that you either had a problem with or that caught you by surprise. For example, if you thought it would take 2 hours to build the video and it wound up taking 10, that might be the warning shot for the next class that gets us of don't underestimate how much time it's going to take to do this. So I want to put together just kind of a frequently asked questions page from all of you with your input that I can share with my next class in the summertime and in the fall. So they have firsthand information from the people who've already done this in your words and your reactions, because what I think it's going to take to do it and what it actually takes to do it, there's some difference in there. I want to make sure that the upcoming folks have got a pretty good understanding of that. That being said, I know you're the first group to have done this assignment, and I probably could have done some things differently maybe to make this a better assignment. I don't think it was a bad assignment, but I just want to keep making this better. So with that understanding, know that I'll know that whenever I'm grading and reading these things. So I'll take all that into consideration. And then the next class, they'll have the benefit of your knowledge, but they won't have the benefit of me being a little bit easier on them, perhaps, in the grading. So hopefully that's a win-win for everyone in here. In general, do you like the assignment? Is it better than taking tests or just writing a research paper?
I like it.
I'm enjoying grading them much more than just reading papers. I will tell you, it's much more informative for me to do it this way. All right. Good deal. Let's get, I want to finish up chapter 6 today in the Sweet Soul Music, and then next week we're going to get into really where you probably thought the class was going to begin to start out with. No one knew this was going to start in the 20s, right? So we're going to get to the 70s and 80s and beyond. But some important things I want to wrap up today with the soul music. The first thing is we didn't really get to listen to much of some of these example things, and I wasn't physically here, and it's tough for me to do some of the conversation. I want to have some follow-up. But some of this music you know much better than you think you know. Let's start with... Oh, let me skip this. And here we go. Give it a few more seconds and... Does anybody recognize that?
Of course.
You don't get to talk about this. Delaney, do you recognize it?
Yeah, I know it. I can't tell you what it's from or anything.
Nashville. Yes. Who's on the right down there in white t-shirt? I can't really tell.
That's Mackenzie. Yeah,
Mackenzie, okay. Look.
It's been in a lot of movies, I know. It's pretty familiar.
It is very familiar. It is from, the most recognizable thing is from The Sandlot.
Oh, yeah.
At the beginning.
That's the thing I've ever heard.
It's in the Blues Brothers, right?
It is.
It is in the Blues Brothers. I forgot about that. It makes an appearance in there too. So this is, the name of this song, it actually has a name, and it's called Green Onions, like the things you chop up and you put in your salad, green onions. The name of the tune is Green Onions, and written and done, produced by Booker T and the MGs. Why does Booker and the T and the MGs, why should that be a familiar name? Who is this?
They're the studio band for a lot of artists.
For what? They're the studio band for a lot of artists, but for what studio?
Stax.
For Stax. Booker T and the MGs is the house band for Stax Recording Studios. Muscle Shoals, who's the house band for Muscle Shoals? The Swampers. Not the Shrimpers, the Swampers. That's Bubba Gump. No, so we've got Booker T and the MGs, the Swampers, and then we go up to Motown, up to Hitsville. Who's the house band for Motown? The Funk Brothers, right? So now we've got the Funk Brothers up there, and they play in the Snake Pit. James Jamerson and his bass called the Funk Machine, which is so cool. I wish I had a bass called the Funk Machine. Mine is just more like the Stop Play It machine because you're so bad machine. That's a joke. You can laugh at me. And then Atlantic. We get over to Atlantic. What do we know about the Atlantic rhythm section? Or what do you know from your reading about the Atlantic rhythm section?
Right here.
How about they don't have one? It's a transient group of folks that comes through and plays with Atlantic. That it changes. The Atlantic sound is it's much more orchestral, very highly scripted, written out things with a lot of professional musicians that are, I don't want to say classically trained, but formally trained musicians that come in and they you sit down, you hand out a sheet of music, everybody stops at the top left, you play it down, and that's the song. There are some very distinct advantages of having everything written down because you can come in, and as the saying is, time is money. It costs a lot of money to get studio time, and to hire musicians gets very expensive, especially if you're going to have a large group of performers. Columbia is the same way, used very thick orchestrations with a lot of musicians in the room, 15 to 30 people playing some of these really thick string parts and some of the sweeter soul music, not the kind of the southern soul, but the sweet soul music. And that was originally the beginning of Aretha Franklin's career when she was working out of Atlantic. In Columbia, the orchestrations didn't really support her style of singing, which is a really gritty, dirty southern gospel, kind of a bluesy sound in her voice. But lay it over the top of a full orchestra that has that really it's dripping with sugar. It is so sweet from the orchestra stuff. Those two things really didn't go together. So her career really didn't take off until she left and she goes with Jerry Wexler to another recording studio. So we've got these different kind of things in the groups that had the house bands of Stax, Motown, and Muscle Shoals and the Fame Studios. Those folks that had the house bands, it's a very different kind of sound. Let me come and watch a real brief interview with Rick Hall. If you've had a chance to watch the video, the Muscle Shoals documentary, this is the gentleman that started kind of this new movement. He was there when Southern rock was invented by accident one morning. So it's a good interview. This is not from the video, but there's some prompts that we'll discuss about. And first you see, do you feel it's difficult? Is it a generational thing with young people in music?
Well, that's part of it, of course. But the thing that I miss most is good music. I'm talking about songs with melodies and great lyrics. And that's just do wah do wah 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 da ba do 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 wah wah wah.
If it's that organized.
If it's that organized, then I'm gonna kill a cop and a horse and blah blah blah. And so a lot of vulgarness has gone into it, and a lot of it's been taken over by. I think it's been taken over by people that don't know much about music. Most of them are attorneys. Most of them are not like we were. We were all about the music. We were all about, I want to hear that new record on so-and-so. I want to buy that. I want to hear that. I want to hear that. How's that go? And, that kind of thing. But now it's gotten so bad that nobody in Nashville or anywhere else, and I'm mainly in the publishing business now, want to hear these songs. And they hear them and say, look, I want to hear one song, I want to hear one song. And so in our day, I wanted the whole album and I wanted to hear everybody's music, and I was all about the music and the pictures and the styles I played. The Jimmy Johnsons and and the Joe Souths and you know, all the great Dwayne Allman and great pitchers and so forth, because we had a lot more variety. There was much more hunger for real music. And of course, it started changing with disco, and then we went from disco to acid rock and all those things, which actually left me out.
I think, too, what's really coming back, too, is analog.
Yes.
You know, it's been that way on a lot of things in our, I remember when everything went solid state for a while as far as guitar amps and stuff, it all came back to tubes. Well, now, Rick has got an analog console up here, and he is really in style. And the top studios around LA, New York, London, all of them are analog consoles with Pro Tools combination. And so, yeah, matter of fact, I have had in the little studio I've got now, I've had a digital console. Well, I'm in the process of hoping to buy Dan Penn's console, an old analog 3000 by Sony, and that will suit me to just, I'll be happy as you can imagine, because that means I can start being the engineer again.
Let's talk about this for a second. Jimmy Johnson is the guy on the right. He was the bass player for the Swampers that played all the famous bass lines. We start off the Mustang Sally. That's Jimmy Johnson playing that groove. And he's just a phenomenal bass player that, you know, obviously down in Alabama. But there are a couple of things I wrote down that I want us to talk about in the context of everything we've read. Going back to the very beginning, we've talked about there have been the four filters we've looked through all the time of society, culture, politics, and the business of music. Rick Hall makes an allusion to that music is now being run by people who don't know or understand music, and a lot of it is driven by attorneys and that don't know about music. And the hunger for real music is not the same as it was, and let's just put this in the 70s and the late 60s. What are your reactions to that about how this business has changed? And these are guys that are really, if we have to talk about founding members of rock and roll, these guys are founding members of rock and roll. So let's start with this one. John, you look like you want to say something. I'll let you talk now.
Which part do you want to refer to?
Either one.
What was the first one?
The attorneys that music is now being run by people who don't know really anything about music.
I mean, yeah, because they weren't there when it was happening. Like what people consider music from the 70s and the 60s, they were the ones that were making it happen and creating new music. Like when Southern rock was created, just because Dwayne Allman started doing the slide guitar and that little glass jar he had. Like they created Southern rock right there. You can't really do that nowadays because it's already been done.
So that kind of goes to another comment of, have we discovered? Oh, I'm sorry, Chloe.
I'm just going to add that, like, we've talked a lot about this year about how technology has had a huge influence on the music industry, and how I feel nowadays it's much easier for musicians to be found or heard with all the communication we have. And there's also, I guess, a lot more people being able to be seen and heard, so it gives more competition.
Okay, let's measure this against the popularity arc. We talked about this very early on of when a new sound or a new song comes on the scene, that we can't really project or track the chart, you know, using an algorithm, but there are ways that we can possibly measure a song's success. Number one, is this something new, or is this something that has been done before and this is just a repackaging of that? And then depending on the answer of those questions, we become, are there other artists in the field that have a similar sound or a similar design of their music? And then if so, what kind of traction did those artists have or did those songs have? I'm going to go now to the 90s when jump bands and swing bands were a real big thing, and people started doing dancing from the 20s and the 30s again. And this had a run of about 7 really good years that that we just call it jump music. The 20s and the 30s swing bands were really big, and there were a lot of groups that came out that kind of bordered. They were a transition between maybe pop and ska music, that you have these jump bands in the middle. So when you measure the popularity arc against that music from the 90s, yes, this music's all been done before, but it's been a long time. Are there really long-standing artists? No, there really weren't at the time. So this was something that was old that became new again, and it had a shelf life of about 7 years. There were some 20s and 30s style dance clubs that opened up, a lot of them down in Austin, and they did really well for a handful of years, and then they disappeared as quick as they showed up. Allison.
There's something like that kind of happening again. It's called electro swing, and they're pairing like traditional swing music with like their like, and yeah.
So have y'all heard about the electro swing stuff? Is that what do you know about it? Is that Amanda? What do you know about that?
I was just gonna say that like I've been sort of into electro swing a lot, and they're really taking like pre-existing songs, like not in the style of, but like pre-existing songs, and like adding a beat underneath, and then like remixing it. Like there's one song that I like that really sounds like they've put a record on and they're like scratching it, and then they like put a beat under and added in like a newscast from the 20s, like a radio broadcast from the 20s. And I think it's just like
what's the name of it?
Scratch Marching by someone. Cormac. Kormac.
And it's called Scratch what?
Marchin'.
Interesting. Okay, electro swing. I have not heard of this term. How long has this been around?
I realized
6 months, year?
Yeah, I think it's really come about in sort of like the last 2 years, maybe. It's really recent. Yeah.
So where do you, outside of Spotify or Pandora, where would you find this on a radio? What kind of station would carry the electro swing?
There's like one song that I think was played on like just like the popular music, like a pop station, like Top 40. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what
Mackenzie, I mean, is this anything y'all, or Kellen, have y'all heard any of this stuff?
No, I've never heard of this.
The electro swing? No, I'll have to check into this. Delaney, you know anything about electro swing?
Not at all.
Interesting, because we've got a pretty widespread audience of what we listen to, and we're kind of all over, which is really great. But it's kind of compartmentalized, that I don't fancy myself really as one genre over another kind of listener, but this certainly has not fallen onto my radar yet. So, wow. Okay. But let's talk about the album versus the song. We've talked about this in the beginning, kind of in the front part of the class, that the effect of Spotify or iTunes and Pandora, where you can pick out individual songs. I just like this song. And then you buy that song, and then so the need for the album, maybe it's kind of gone away. I don't know. Rick talks about that their focus really was on an album, not on single tracks and single cuts. The textbook talks about that what were the genres that were concerned with albums? And they list 3 of them. There were 3 specific genres that were concerned with an entire album. First one starts with the letter C. L.
Country?
A.
Oh, wait.
Classical, country, and then J.
Jazz.
A. Jazz. Jazz, country, and classical music. They were really the only genres that were putting together complete albums. Up to this point, full albums weren't being done on the pop side or in the pop circuit or rhythm and blues circuit. It was all about singles, A-side and B-side tracks. You'd have an A-side, and the B-side was the thing you hope caught on. But as far as a full 33 platter, a lot of that stuff didn't come around until the late 60s and early 70s. Part of this still has to do with technology and the cost of producing these things. But with the expense that it cost to make the albums, it's interesting that it's three lesser known genres that latched onto the album and not pop music. Now, as we get into the late 60s, and certainly into the early 70s, and then we get into progressive rock, albums become very thematic, that there's the story that's being told. David Bowie, certainly, great storyteller in all of his albums. So when you take a Bowie song in isolation off of an album, it may have a cool hook, it may have a cool kind of background or feeling to it, but contextually, the lyrics of what it's dealing with are lost in the abstract. When you get Styx, Electric Light Orchestra, Genesis, Pink Floyd, these are all storytelling albums that there are some cool tracks that make it off of there, but it's the album as its own piece of art that the artist is trying to convey some kind of message to the listener. Let me get back over in here. So coming back, we talked. So now Booker T and the MGs, they're the house band for Stax, and Green Onions. Now when you hear that, you can say, oh, that's Booker T and the MGs. Those guys worked at Stax. And that can be your long-term, forever life takeaway. That whenever you watch Sandlot with your kids in 15 years, you're like, oh man, we talked about that one time in class. Let me get on over here. Muscle Shoals in the Midnight Hour. All right. Wilson Pickett. An interesting guy. He's originally working at Atlantic Records, but the feeling and the groove that they're trying to get that feeling, it's not happening in Atlantic. For whatever reason, it can be the orchestra, it can be the orchestration, it can be their Brill approach to writing, that they've got songwriters and professionals in there that are not necessarily performers. I think one of the interesting things, and we really take a step back and look at this, we're really talking about artists as performers and writers at the same time. These are bands that wrote their own material for the most part and performed their own material for the most part. It's a real tight group of folks, and that's how they get that repetitive sound that when you hear something that's recorded from the Southern studios, it has a very definite sound because of their approach to the recording. One of the things that's the trademark of Stax and the Southern stuff, Muscle Shoals and the Fame Studios, and the book talks about this delayed backbeat of things that are happening on 2 and 4. How many times have you been to a concert, and maybe not necessarily in a rock venue, but some other thing where there's music being played and people start to clap? And inevitably, they clap on 1 and 3. And it is the squarest, most awkward feeling in the world, because they're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't get much squarer or lame than clapping on 1 and 3. If you just wait one beat and clap on 2 and 4 on that backbeat, 1, 2, 3, 4. When we listen to this, we'll listen to some examples of this, of how that backbeat really changes everything. And we'll clap on 1 and 3 and then clap on 2 and 4, and it changes the complete context of what's happening. But again, non-musicians, they don't really feel or understand that there are places within the music and the space that makes things sound the way they sound. So really, to this point, we've not talked a lot about the characteristic sound of what made Elvis music sound like Elvis music, what made bluegrass music sound like bluegrass music, other than some of the instrumentation. Now we're going to start talking much more about the composition of what's happening within the things, within the song. So Wilson Pickett, In the Midnight Hour, another really well-known chart, great song. One, two. You can hear the majority of these things are hitting on 2 and 4. And this is that delayed backbeat instead of being on 1 and 3, which is, don't take this term the wrong way, but it's 1 and 3 is a very white way to play stuff. The sole way to do this is on 2 and 4, where you wait, you let the music develop and evolve, but then you can hear the bass drum and the bass guitar player playing simultaneously together. That's called locking in. When those guys get together and play and they tighten up that rhythm section, that's what makes this thing sound like it's always moving forward, and there's always some kind of direction, and there's an intensity that comes out in the recording when you start to listen to this a little bit differently. So keep listening to this and listen for the 2 and 4 in the back of it. Oh, and this is Jimmy Johnson, the guy in that video, playing the bass line in this. Now, here's an interesting thing about this. You hear the instruments in the background. This is very characteristic of soul or R&B music, to have a horn section in the background. As we get later down and we kick the can down the road a little further, Chicago, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Tower Power are very jazz rock oriented groups that have their beginning in soul and rhythm and blues. Of you take a band instrument like a trumpet, trombone, a saxophone, you take them out of that, you put them in a rock setting, it's a very different thing that's happening. Again, now these musicians that are playing here, these are not formally trained, highly refined, musicians, and you can hear in their playing that they don't always start together, and they certainly don't end their line together, their lick together. We call a little horn passage whenever they play, we call that a lick, and then you just play your lick, you get out of the way, you come back and you play your other lick and get out of the way. If you listen to the end of the horn licks, they're not clean, they're not precise, and that's part of the beauty of these recordings is they're very just raw. They're not highly refined. The difference between Motown recordings and these Southern recordings, Motown stuff is very polished. Barry Gordy, very much a control freak, of going in and having organized rehearsals with the musicians, still without music, so it's not a Columbia or an Atlantic Records type setup. It's still more organic, but it is structured to the point of they have a chart that's written out and they'll rehearse the parts. We get down to Fame, Muscle Shoals, much less rehearsal, and it's more about let's just go cut it, and then they just go in and they just play it. So that's why you hear the wrong notes in here, you hear wrong entrances, you'll hear delayed attacks or releases at the end of the stuff. It's not polished, and that's kind of the beauty in some of this stuff. So it's the same thing. And the form for this thing, what do you hear as far as the form on this? I think the form is actually laid out in the book for this one. Let me see. Yeah, on page 238, they've got the form for this thing. So if you've got your book, you want to open up to that and take a look at it. It's really an A form over and over and over. There's a small bridge in the middle of it, but for the most part, the chords don't change. The bass line doesn't really change. He's got the verse that he lays over the top of that, and there is no chorus to the chart. So it's just, we would call that a groove. The rhythm section just establishes a groove, and a lot of the Southern soul music is just one repeated groove that's over and over and over. And the focus is where? What as a listener, what stands out to you more in this song than maybe some other stuff, but this one in particular, what stands out?
The horns for me.
John says the horns, and he's an instrumentalist, so he's kind of gravitates there. Delaney, what do you hear?
The lyrics.
The lyrics. Rebecca, what do you hear? What sticks out in your mind, the takeaway from this one?
Well, I feel like we've kind of already touched on it, but it's that like backbeat, that like hitting, like I could really count that, like 1, 2, 3, 4, like that.
Right on, man. Right, this would be a really easy thing to dance to, man. It's a slow groove, man. It's an intense piece. It's great. Chloe, what were you gonna add to that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say the backbeat of like whenever what you were doing before. So
it's the recordings that are done by the Southern Studios. It really puts the vocalist in the forefront, and that's what the takeaway is. You've got this great rhythm section, this great horn section behind that that's supporting them, but there's no background. There's no doo-wop singers in the back of this. Very not a Temptations type setup. Temptations still have a horn section, but it's a much more refined and polished thing. I mean, obviously, because they've got the Temptation walk and they've got their 7 steps that they use in their dance. But with this newer type of rhythm and blues and this soul music, it's really about one performer, and that's the person that's at the center of the stage. I'll start this again, and we've talked about you can really hear that driving backbeat on 2 and 4. But so now if we clap on 1 and 3, it changes as compared to on the backbeat. And where that comes from, this really strong backbeat has to do with 2 things. One, the drum set player just playing that snare drum, really thick snare drum on the backbeat on 2 and 4. But it's also the bass player that he's moving with the chords on the backbeat to move with that thing. So your ear is following the melodic shape of the line with the rhythmic shape of the line, that these 2 things are working together. And that's what makes this thing feel like it's always moving forward, even though it's not a fast song. It's not an intense song. There's not a lot of electric things happening in there. It's not overproduced. It is what it is, and it's great music because it's just so raw and authentic. Let's compare that to Baby Love with the Supremes. Now think about the backbeat with this one. What kind of feeling do you have from this one? Let's talk about the rhythmic piece of this.
There's a little bit, the emphasis is still on 2 and 4, but it's less.
Okay. I would agree with that. There, you can still hear the backbeat on 2 and 4, but it's a lot less pronounced. I would agree with that. Chloe, did you have your hand up, or are you just waving your hair?
I was gonna say, like, it's much more smooth than the previous one. It's also that makes it, I feel like, a lot more catchy. Like this, then
smooth.
It's gonna be
That's a good descriptor. Okay, smooth and catchy. I like the smooth part of that. Yeah, Delaney.
Yeah, I think, like, I don't know, the other one you could definitely hear the beat more because you could, like, clap to it, but this one you can't really, I guess. Like, it's, like, I'm not a super musical person, so, like, for me it's a lot harder to, like, find the beat in this one.
Okay, yeah, I'm not going to disagree with that. It's much more subtle in that. Rebecca, you're trying to get in on this, or not so much?
I definitely agree with what everybody's been saying, especially, like, not as much emphasis because it's still there. It almost seems, I'm not sure, it seems more sped up and, like, definitely more, it flows more, that beat, with the, like, lyrics and the sound of the song in general.
Okay. And now let's talk about, let's listen a little bit more of this and go back to Midnight Hour with Wilson Pickett, of the instrumentation. There are 3 horn players, I think, in that recording, and you've got a bass guitar, a drum set, and a guitar player. Real minimal keyboards, not so much, just a little bit of keyboard. But compare that to this one. Does it sound like there's a lot more going on as far as just the number of instruments that are included in here? Does this feel as organic or natural as Wilson Pickett, or does this seem more produced and and I don't want to call it choreographed, but yeah, produced.
It's very wall of sound.
The wall of sound. Okay, it's very wall of sound. Allison said it's very wall of sound. I would agree. I would tend to agree with that. And this is a Motown thing. This is a Berry Gordy production up here. So there's still a little bit of the southern, the sweet soul that's in there. But when we hear the Supremes' Baby Love against Wilson Pickett, can you obviously pick out the sweet soul versus the southern soul in the differences in what they're sounding like? Let's take a listen to this one. And there's those bad horn players in there, man. It is what it is. What about this? Is this sweet soul or southern soul?
Southern.
What do you think, Rebecca? I'll go around and get a kind of thought from everybody.
I guess I'd say southern soul, but I'm not sure.
I like southern soul ? Let me go over. I'll get everybody. What about Nashville Classroom proper? What do y'all think it sounds like?
I would also say Southern Soul.
Southern? Yeah. All right. Maria, what do y'all think?
Southern.
I agree.
Southern? Maybe. Delaney, what do you think?
Southern.
Southern? What do y'all think here?
Southern.
Southern, Casey?
I think the vocals sound southern, but the musicality, it sounds more like Baby Love than it sounds like In the Midnight Hour.
Oh, okay. Did y'all hear Casey? She says there's a little bit of the southern, but also a little bit of the Baby Love sound with the instruments in the background. Allison.
Well, I think in this song, the only things during the verses that you hear are the bass guitar and the drum. That's it, with little riffs of horns and guitar every now and again. So I think that it's more sparing than like the Motown, like wall of sound-esque sound that we heard in Baby Love.
I was just about to stop this and say, listen down to the bass. Amanda.
Yeah, it seems sort of like somewhere in between to me, because it seems like Southern Soul is a lot more like freeform, and like there was the melody vocal line and the bass line and the horn, and they seem sort of separated, but they work together. While the Sweet Soul seems like more of the wall of sound, but this sort of like seems somewhere in between. Like it has sort of that wall of sound feel, but it also has like the little riffs. Like I feel like it has a lot more like details than Baby Love did.
Okay. So we'll listen a little bit more of this, and you'll hear the chorus now on the backbeat. There's the tambourine that they add to really emphasize the backbeat of 2 and 4. Now, as a horn player, I'll tell you this, and I've played in plenty of these like cover groups that do this stuff, that these instrument licks, we just know them from listening to it. They're really not written down anywhere. But when you play with one of these soul type bands, a lot of times we will add instruments to songs that haven't ever been there before, and the trumpet player might play a little horn pop. Bump, dum, 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 ah. Like, okay, so that's what we're going to do. And then they'll make a statement one time, and then the other horn players, however many of there are in the group, will like, we're going to do the horn pop on the backbeat of 4. Great. And then you'll wait until they establish something else. You typically go 1 or 2 choruses, and then the lead guy will play another riff and you just listen to it, you just pick it up. So this is where this organic thing is coming in. And you'll hear there's some little glips and misunderstandings, especially at the beginning of this, of how are we playing this? And eventually they just follow the trumpet player, which is what they should be doing. But this is, kind of characteristic of some of the Southern soul, that it's not really refined and not really well produced. Now, the rhythm section, on the other hand, I think this is where I'm hearing the same things you're describing, that it is the sweet soul, because it is really tight and it's really well put together. You can tell it's not happening by chance. So we've got some of this, we've got both elements happening at the same time. There it is again, tambourine. Now you hear the snare drum has stopped giving the backbeat on 2 and 4, and now they're going on all fours on the quarters, man. Just drive, drive, drive. In the background, the tambourine takes over the backbeat of the 2 and the 4. The Sam and Dave, they're mentioned specifically in the text about something interesting that happened with this group. What is this? Oh,
they were signed at Atlantic, but they recorded with Stax.
There we go. Yeah, they were signed. These were Atlantic artists, but Jerry Wexler takes them, and Wexler's the guy that's running Stax down with Jim Stewart and Estelle Axton. So they've got the Stax people, the brother and sister that open up Stax. He loans from Atlantic. They loan Stax Sam and Dave. And they go, time goes on, and then Atlantic has a falling out kind of within itself. It's bought out by another company, at which time they remember, oh, yeah, you don't own us. We're on loan to you, as some goodwill. Well, so Stax eventually folds. Atlantic is swallowed up by another big company. And the internal thing at Atlantic was Atlantic only used their artists. They didn't do any outside recordings and then remarket as an Atlantic thing. But Sam and Dave was kind of the exception to that thing, that they were a peace offering at some point between these competing record companies. And they really kind of got lost in the shuffle when these two companies kind of folded in on themselves. But they, this is Sam and Dave. They were kind of artists without a home. They were owned by one and loaned to the other. So they still had some great music, and really this the Soul Man probably made most famous by the Blues Brothers and Saturday Night Live from stuff that they've done in there. Wow, we've covered a lot today in this week. I'm going to be posting up under the cool links area. There was a thing I wanted to do today that was going to be dynamic, but the interwebs are not wanting to cooperate. I'm going to put up there a shared Google Drive or a Google Doc that I want you to give your couple of thoughts about the rockumentary assignment, that if what you wish someone had told you, if someone could have told you something to make this better. Just 1 or 2 thoughts, nothing more than that. We don't want to give them too much help. We still want them to struggle too, but we'll go with it that direction. Does anybody have any questions of me before we wrap up? Go. Delaney.
What chapter should we have read through by Friday?
We wrapped up 6 today. We need to be about halfway through 7. I'll cover the first half of 7. And the psychedelic 70s is where we're headed with this stuff. And there's just so much to cover, not a lot of time. So the more you can have read in advance for that, that'd be great. So chapter 7 is where we need to be now. Good question. Anything else? I'm going to try and have your projects graded within the next week and a half. That's my goal, is to get these things off my desk. So you'll be hearing from me on this stuff. Thank you for the assignments, and I will see y'all on Friday.
I'm not going to be here Friday.